So I've looked over the illustration that we're going to do this week, and for me, there's a way that suggests itself, and that would be having my initial wash being pretty much the color of her skin. I see that color behind almost everything else. And then a second wash of about the same color to get the track and maybe darken up the background a little bit, and then a wash to darken her leg, and then washes into the background to darken that up. Now, the big problem this painting presents is how to paint the crowd. And so I can think of at least 4 ways of doing it, and I thought I'd share those with you in this video. So the first is just block all those people forms out. And I've just done random kind of oval circular shapes. And then wash in my final colors. So given that my very first wash is going to be her flesh color, I'll just go ahead and put that on. Okay, another way of doing it that I can imagine is just putting my washes on top of color that I've already laid down. Now let's see whether or not that works. So if this were my first wash, I'll come back and hit that again with subsequent washes, but this again is that first wash that would look like her skin. Another way is to just go ahead and wash everything in and then draw off, meaning kind of blot out where those face or crowd figures are. So that would mean pretty much laying down all my washes again and then blotting that out. And then the last, I have to mix up more of this flesh color. The last way I could envision doing it is just now putting my wash in around the people that I've already painted. And for that I'll get a little bit larger of a brush because it doesn't obviously have to be real accurate. But here we go. And this, I think, is probably the most difficult because, of course, it's going to require doing this 2 or 3 times as we build up our washes. And it's probably going to leave gaps of white. Now, that doesn't have to be a problem. We can go back and drag those off. But this is going to get tedious trying to do a whole background of these. But let's just see how it works. It may end up being the way we have to go with this. Alright, so I'm going to let these dry. Alright, my second wash is going to be a little bit more of burnt sienna than yellow. Because I want to establish that pretty much the final color of the track, and most of that crowd area can go this warm. So in this one, this is getting all the washes. This one is getting all the washes. This one will be getting all the washes, so we'll go ahead and mix up just a little bit more of that. And it's going to be hard to see once we get the dark stuff on there, but that's okay, we'll have an idea. And now this one, again, we'll try to paint around. And there's only going to be 2 more washes, and the second or the final 2 washes we'll kind of paint them together. So I'm just kind of painting around these shapes I've already put in, rather than washing on top of them, putting a whole wash on. All right, let me dry that. All right, now we need to get this, since this is the background behind the runner, we need to get the background dark enough that the runner, essentially, let's say this is a little bit darker than her body, will pop off of that background quite a bit. So this is probably about the color of the track. Her body will be a little bit lighter in some places, a little bit darker in some places. And now we have to construct a wash that will make her body really pop off of that. And that means it's going to have to go with probably burnt umber and violet and blue. So let me just mix up. I think I have burnt umber on this one, maybe not. No. And I know I don't have it here. So, grab a palette where I do have burnt umber. So it's kind of a deadish kind of brown color, but all the warmth we've laid down underneath it will warm it up some. And I'm going to make 3 puddles here. I'm going to make a burnt umber puddle, nice big one. And now I will make, this is a cobalt blue. We could go ultramarine too, but I don't want it to get almost black, if I can help it. So nice big puddle of the cobalt blue, and then some violet. So these will be the 3 colors that I'll do my final wash in of the background. And it seems to be more, I would say, burnt umber in the upper left-hand corner, and then it goes over to a mixture of burnt umber and blue, and then kind of fades into violet and maybe even some red in the background. But I think we've provided the equivalent of red with our burnt sienna wash. So here goes. On the first one, I'll just lay in some burnt umber on this. Looks like it's going to require a lot. And I'll just, for the heck of it now, touch some blue in here and there. And fade that down to a violet. On this one, same thing. I'll go burnt umber up here. And I'm just losing my people completely. So I'm not sure this is going to be the way to go. Might be though when it dries, we'll have to see. And I'll drop some violet in there like that. Now that's about like Bernie's painting is. But unfortunately we seem to have really lost our people. So again on this one, same deal, I'll experiment with putting in some burnt umber. And you can see how that cobalt blue is really, at least when it's wet, making a dark color when it mixes with the burnt umber. And then I'll bring some violet in. There. The violet's gone, it's mixed with that burnt umber pretty heavily. And now I don't even know if this can be done, but we'll take the burnt umber. Yeah, I don't know that, number one, I have the patience, and number two, whether or not this is just going to look good at all. So we'll get some burnt umber in there. Toss some blue in, and I'll just touch the blue into the wet spots, and it should follow the wet spots and not cover up what's already painted there. And then I'll touch in some violet here. All right, let me dry this. Let me get some more violet in up here. Some blue. And with a paper towel or a Kleenex handy so that I can dab out, I'm just going to, on this one, go in and try to slightly remove some of those kind of facial forms, maybe some body forms. And that seems to be working fairly well. And then, of course, some of them I'll go ahead and put color back into. I think that these people are standing out more than these folks are. So this might be the way to do this. So let me go down into the real dark stuff, see if that pulls off. Yes, it does. So again, this is, you could use a Q-tip for this. This is an oil brush that's it used to be about this long. It's all blunt now and perfect for pulling off paint. Now I still have, this might work, or this with a combination of this might work best. Let's just take a look at what happens with this when we drop some color into these guys. Like that. This might work as well. That might work as well. We'll see how that looks when it dries. Get some more on there, maybe some reds, and then maybe a little bit of light blue. That's not actually so light, is it? And if we kind of mishmash it together, okay, that crowd's working pretty good. So let's go ahead and just do the same thing here, where I've pulled off. And let's see what blue results in when I put that in. That's a little dark. Some violet. Maybe some reddish faces here. And again, if I brush those a little bit. All right, so these are the 4 options I can think of. If you can think of something else, definitely I urge you to go ahead and make a square and try that out. Let me just remove the tape. this one is not. And yet this one works. This one works. This one almost works. So I could also conceive a scenario where you might use this one in combination with drawing off. And I might even do that on my final piece. So there's a glimpse of how to try to handle that background. I've given you a print that you can print off and blacken the back of with a pencil, and then use that to trace the runner's figure on your paper. The rest of it you just kind of sketch in, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate that next. Okay, so I've decided that the method I'm going to use to get the crowd is going to be a combination of methods, putting in some dots first, and then when all my washing is done, removing some and adding some more color to it. Now I've got my figure sketched in. I used the template to get the overall outline, then I just added the sketching. And I want you to pay close attention to how I do these initial washes. The first wash is going to cover absolutely everything except her hat, the flag, and her tracksuit and socks. Okay, I've made this wash from yellow ochre. I've used a little bit of alizarin crimson, some burnt sienna, enough to get it to a kind of a tannish pink color. Now this wash, as I said, is going to go everywhere. So I've mixed up a ton of it so that I don't run out, and here we go. I'm working on paper that is on a bit of a slant. Now I've already covered over part of my flag, which I didn't want to do. So I'm going to come down quickly. Remember, not the hat. I want to come down quickly because I don't want these blots of color to run. I want them to, as much as possible, stay blots. All right, I'm going to, let's see, on this, remember, cover everything except her tracksuit. So even her face, and not her hat. I keep going over her hat. Continue walking this bead down. Carefully cut the corner there, and on her, cut around her suit, then back onto her legs, but not her socks. Okay, so I want to be careful with the wash as I get down to the track. I want the track to appear, not splotchy. So I'm going to reestablish a bead and just walk it down around her feet. Now Bernie Fuchs, the original illustrator of this, was a really interesting painter. He painted a lot of his paintings by projecting a slide onto his canvas and then painting kind of in the semi-dark there with oil paint. And you can see very thin, kind of washy oil paint. All right, I'm going to dry this. Right, my next wash is going to be rather similar in color, but it is going to have more burnt sienna in it, just flat out burnt sienna, to establish for me the color of the track behind her. You can see it's kind of a clay looking track. And if you've ever been on those tracks, this is an old track. This is probably, I don't know when she ran, but I'm going to guess the 70s. So it's going to darken up just a little bit. Everything again is going to get hit except the top part of her body, the part of the thigh that's in the sunlight, and her face. Although I'm going to go ahead and start with her face because I am going to put in her hair. The shadow of her face coming down, this eye, shadow here, shadow under her nose, up onto her cheek, like so. And I can see right now that I have an issue. I didn't wash this with the initial color. Okay, that should do. All right, now I'm going to bring the wash down the rest of the page. I'll avoid this thigh. Everything else should end up being this color. So you'll see it get darker, more like terracotta, hopefully. I'm avoiding the flag. I'm avoiding her hat. I'm going to avoid her arm now. Remember, I'm avoiding her upper body. So I'll paint that right into there, just like that. Whoops, I did hit her upper body there. So let's carefully walk this down, avoid that arm, like that. And I should probably, while it's still wet, at least get this in here like that. Avoiding the face, the neck, her tracksuit, and that upper arm. Okay, now her body should start to pop off of this a little bit. I'm avoiding the top part of her leg, painting in the track, and you can see Bernie's strokes. The paint's just dripping down. So I'm not going to worry if my paint looks drippy. And remember, as always, we're not trying exactly to copy Bernie's painting. We're using it as inspiration, but also as a learning device. So now we'll let this dry. I've kind of made a mess of her head, haven't I? And I do need to get a little bit of that flesh color, that initial wash, which I have a little bit of it left, up onto her thumb. And I'll try to pull off a little bit on her hand there, because her hand needs to be bright, so I will go back and pull off on that. So let's get this dried. Now before I go any further with my washes, from now on my washes are going to end here, but I am going to just put in I'm going to darken up the wash I just did with a wee bit of violet. And then with that violet, I'm going to put in the shadowed legs as carefully as possible. Like that. Carry that shadow up that part of the leg just a little bit. And like that, we can draw in a line there. Good, now that looks about right. Going to take a little bit of that flesh color and model in some of the musculature right there, armpit right there, and up into the elbow some. And over on this side, there's a bicep line, armpit. And when I'm pulling out the rest of the crowd, I will also pull off that hand again, just because it should be pretty bright. It's extended way up there in the air. While I'm at it, I'm just going to take a little bit of a nice light blue and just touch it in there. And more of a violet and touch it in there. Now that feels like that's in the shadow. And that's the type of treatment I'll do on her running uniform as well. However, I'll do that much later. So now it's time for that really fun set of washes where we'll be washing in a good deal of burnt umber up here. We'll be adding blue, and it will probably be cobalt blue over here, and then finishing up that wash with a violet down to the edge of the track. I'm excited about this. This is going to be fun. It's going to look really beautiful. So I'll be working, unfortunately, on 3 palettes here. I should say my colors are on 3 palettes. I'll mix them all on this palette and then use this palette to do the painting. So here's my burnt umber. I'm going to make a huge puddle of that. This is one point where we do not want to run out of our wash. So we want plenty of all the colors. Paper's not going to be that thirsty. It's got a lot of washes in it right now too, obviously, but we don't want to run shy. So you can see I'm just mixing up a ton of this stuff. Okay, so I have a lot of brown. Now I'll mix up a lot of the cobalt and I'll set it into this palette so that I'll work everything from this palette. And I want to make sure I have enough that I can really paint easily a third of that area with each of the colors. And now it's going to be really important to have a lot of that nice violet. Because that violet's going to finish off the washes down the page. Okay, I think that's good. So here we go. Rinse out my brush a little so that mostly what I'm getting is brown. So burnt umber to start with. Just start a bead of burnt umber. And I'll be walking this bead down this page. Whoops. Oops. So you see I've got the bead there. I have to be careful to avoid the flag. I have to be real careful to avoid the hand. It's difficult doing this with such a clumsy big brush. Okay, that'll turn more blue. So continuing with the brown, bringing it down to about here. Let's get the cock of the wrist. And we'll stop the brown about there. Actually, I'll put a little bit in over on this side, but this is where the blue is going to kick in. So I'll bring some blue all the way across, but I want primarily blue up in this quadrant. Watch that head. So I'm going to go right over the hair and very carefully just up to the arm. Got a shoulder in there, and we'll bring it down on the hair here and then around. Very carefully, avoiding what we need to leave fleshy. Okay, I'm going to just throw some more blue in there and let the blue sit. I'm going to bring the blue over underneath the arm. And now also down here, so that now I can introduce the violet. And the violet will complete the wash. Down to roughly here, where the track is. I'm going to take some of the violet up there. I'm going to take some of the blue up there. Remember, this can be a little washy looking. It doesn't have to be really dense because it's the figure we want to stand out. Okay. So violet there, and that's going to make a really pretty wash when all is said and done. I'm just going to pump some more blue into that upper wash. It seems to be fading on me. There we go. That's going to look awesome. All right, my paper's really wet. I'm going to save the detail work on the face until after I dry. However, I'm going to be really careful about one thing. I've got quite a puddle from my wash collecting right here. So I will kind of paint it in to these areas here. And the problem is, she's probably going to look like she's got a mustache. But we'll bring it down. Like so. And then we'll put hair on her, scratch out earrings and teeth, and give her a little blush on the cheeks, and it should look good. I'm getting quite a puddle here, so I'm going to get the hairdryer going. Okay, I have a few little spots to dry yet, so right now I'm just going to, while they're drying, try to avoid them with my hands as I paint in the stripes on the flag. And some of that can just bleed like right out into the background. So I'm using a mix of reds here and quinacridone and rose as well. As it goes through the folds or out in the sun, the red of the flag changes colors some. So just wash in a nice big stripe right there. Make this look like it's kind of folding as it's flapping as she runs around. And then you can handle those stars any way you want. I'm going to kind of ignore them just for the sake of time on the video. But probably the best way for me, if I'm ignoring them, is to come back with my X-Acto and scratch them out. Now that flag is on a stick, and that stick is like a dark brown. But first off, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to clean up that hand. So before I do any cleaning, I make sure that I have very clean water so that I'm not going back in and dabbing this hand with dirty water. And I'm going to pull out just the thumb and the fingers a little bit, which will then allow me to, when it dries, go back in and put in that flag stick. Now I think I'll deal with a little bit of the detail on her. We'll put in her hair. About like so. And maybe just a little bit of detail of like eyelashes. I don't think I can go that small with this brush. I'll get up my finer brush here. And see if we can't make her look a little more feminine. So I'm working with ultramarine blue here and going into the red. It'll look more like shadows. So we'll shadow her face right there. Lighten up the neck shadow a little bit. Put some blush onto the cheeks, and I mean just a small amount. I didn't really define her chin very well there. Let me see if I can go back in and get that. Maybe not. Might be best left alone and just go with what we get. Time to put in the baton on the flag. Use a neutral tint for that. Come back and hit the hair one more time. It's going to end up looking more like a man, but sometimes that happens. Okay, just a little bit of detail on the hat, that shadow area, and then she would be holding the bill. I'm going to hope that ends up looking like a hat. Now, I'm going to leave the uniform for right now, and just, you guys can just deal with the uniform however you want. I don't know if I'll have time on the video to show that, but I do want to try to now do a few things with my crowd. So see, that pulls off really rather nicely. So I can do some shirts and an arm. And just some general shapes here. Several up here. You know, I'm not going for what Bernie's got here. I'm actually going to make the crowd a lot more subtle, I think. It's a lot easier to do with oil paint than it is with watercolor. And I think just about that much. And then what I think I'm going to try to do is take this same brush and just in places here and there, scratch in a little color. So some yellow. Whoops, not that much. There seems to be quite a bit of blue back there, so I'll touch in some blue here. You want to get close to her with some of it so that it doesn't look like you're purposely avoiding her. There would be crowd behind her. So we'll put some up there. Some red. And maybe just a little bit of the quinacridone sienna here and there. We'll make it look like there's some people down by the track. And now, real important, let's see if we can do this. So we can get the lane line in there. I don't have a heavy brush thin enough, I think, that it's going to do a really great job, but we'll give it a shot. I certainly won't be able to do those thin lines, but some Chinese white on a thin brush. Okay, and then that just kind of bleeds off like that. All right, very quickly. I'm going to take some quinacridone sienna, mix a touch of blue into it, and that'll be this area on her shorts. Okay, just like that. I'll take some violet, and I'm talking, this is really watered down now. And I have some of this really cool turquoise I think I might try on the shorts where they're up in the light, and the waistband. And a touch of maybe quinacridone rose here and there. Certainly up there. And then later could come in with a small brush and do some detailing on the shirt. Now, I must admit, I am not happy with the face. It looks more like Gabe Kaplan here than Joan Samuelson. But this was a demo and it had to be quick. If I were doing hours on it, I'd do it the same way, but I would make much more certain that I had the detail correct. Yeah, that shirt's still too wet to go ahead and put some lines around it. But there you go. We tried a crowd scene. We used an interesting approach to the painting where our first wash is actually the positive parts of the character, and then we pushed back farther with subsequent washes. Okay, so working light to dark. Second wash gave us our track. Third wash gave us the legs pushing back and then into the crowd scene. So I hope you learned from this one. I really hope you enjoyed doing it. So there it is. There's the tape off, and there's a really rather a nice interpretation of Bernie Fuchs's painting. And you know what? It's just bugging me a little bit, so let me get some of the darks detailed on this uniform. So we'll put a dark violet here. We'll run it down this side. We'll put a rose stripe over here. And a little bit of detail there, there. And that's good enough. You can trace the USA if you want. Scratch out some of the stars. But I think that works really rather nice. It's a nice little watercolor painting in the Olympic spirit.